But if nobody can afford to buy a house, then how the fuck do they keep getting more expensive?
So the idea of being able to save a 20% down payment is almost unimaginable.
Yeah, rent gets raised, 1,000% with no notice. And
a family home should be the bedrock of your financial life. It gives you somewhere to live while building up equity in a place that you can one day call your own. Owning a home with a 30-year mortgage is cheaper out of pocket every month in most cities than renting. So if you can buy your own home, you will be richer now and richer in the future. You already know this.
Due to the mass failure of American education system, and especially the miseducation of the Negro, aka Black Americans, we do not understand how America socially engineered its entire economic system in order to continue to keep Black people in a consistent system of oppression.
To a new deal for the American people.
The New Deal programs launched between 1933 and the end of the Second World War transformed society. But Black Americans reaped far fewer benefits from these programs than white Americans.
We have to get to the root of the problem. And the root of the issue that when white people was in Europe, they lived under a monarchy which created the feudalist system. And under the feudalist system, they had no legal standing. They had no rights. And that is the guidance in which they came to America.
According to Wikipedia, under the English feudal system, the person of the king, asserting his allodial right, was the only absolute owner of land. All nobles, knights and other tenants, termed vassals, merely held land from the king, who was thus at the top of the feudal pyramid.
Well, we have to understand that there was no such thing as white people. There was no such thing as white privilege until over here in America. So what I want us to explore is, why was white privilege created? Why did white people never care about the upliftment of white people as a collective until they came into contact with Black Americans?
First known as waste people and later white trash, marginalized Americans were stigmatized for their inability to be productive, their failure to own property, their unhealthy children, their lack of any sense of uplift on which the American dream is predicated.
Immediately after slavery, white elites realized that they would not be able to compete with blacks. And in order to dilute Black excellence, white America elites recruited poor whites from Europe and empowered them in order to devalue our political power.
Did you know before Central Park was created, there was the tiny village of Seneca, where 2/3 of the population was Black? This neighborhood was one of the few African-American enclaves at the time where a lot of the residents were homeowners. Seneca Village began in 1825 when landowners in the area began selling some of their land. A 25-year-old Black shoe shiner by the name of Andrew Williams bought the first 3 lots for $125.
Seneca Village comprised approximately 70 buildings. There was 3 churches. The first church to be created was the African Union Church. This church also did have a school, and it was one of the few schools that was available for African American students. So it helps us understand Seneca Village as a place where community and church and education was very important.
You can always tell, can't you? A town with good real estate people is a more substantial community because more people own their own homes. That's right.
I need you to understand that Black people created thriving communities such as Seneca Village 100 years before Roosevelt created the Federal Housing Authority that created the 30-year mortgage that allowed white people to own homes in mass numbers. We had already established communities with 60-70% home ownership. And understand that Seneca Village was at a time when America was still going through slavery, pre-Civil War.
The best example of how European ethnics would finally gain the full benefits of whiteness came with an innovation in housing at the end of World War II. It was a time when hundreds of thousands of GIs came home ready to start families, but had no place to live.
The living space was at a premium. When in the Bronx, they tried building Quonset huts, and they turned to slums. All the Quonset huts had just disintegrated. There were two families sharing a hut. One family at one end, one family at the other, and before you know it, they were off.
I need you to understand that when whites was forced to live in communities without government aid, their communities turned into slums. You have to understand that this all occurred after the Red Summer of 1919, when white mobs burnt down thriving black communities. That's just to put this into context.
The New Deal expanded government capacities in a way that provided economic rights for people: the right to capital, the right to a job, the right to health care, the right to old age pension. What was problematic is that that right was not inclusive.
One of the clearest examples of this came when New Deal agencies began insuring affordable home loans. Before backing the loans, agencies mapped communities across the country, dividing them into zones judged to be higher or lower risk for banks. Records show a key factor federal mapmakers used to determine this perceived risk was race.
We are in a capitalist society with no assets, and this was intentionally designed by the United States government.
Where one's family lives in America is not just a matter of taste and preference. You have the issue of housing and wealth. The majority of Americans hold most of their wealth in the form of home equity. So that's their nest egg. That's how they can finance the education of their offspring. That's how they can sort of save up for retirement. It's their savings bank, right? They're living in their savings bank.
It is imperative for us to have knowledge of how we are actually in this condition and understand that the concept and theory the Europeans push out to the rest of us, that they pulled themselves out by the bootstrap, is a total falsehood, and they actually got in their position due to full government assistance that gave each of those white people basically a bank.
As homes in white communities appreciated in value, the net worth of these white families grew. For most non-white families who stayed in urban neighborhoods, the housing market open to them in the 50s and 60s was largely a rental market. You don't gain equity by paying rent.
I need you to understand that these government subsidized mortgages not only subsidizes the housing, they subsidizes their appliances, which is government subsidizing the jobs that they created for these white people to live in the suburbs. You have to pay attention to the whole picture.
Kitchen dazzles every eye. A brand new sink, a built-in oven, a new refrigerator, and a...
If you were buying a leather home in 1947, 48, 49, 50, and 51, you would get, this would be your kitchen. You would get a GE stove, GE refrigerator, and a Bendix wash machine. It would be part of the real estate.
So when they tell you pull yourself up by the bootstraps, you have to understand that they get way more government assistance than you do, and their government assistance is meant to propel them above you, while your assistance is meant to keep you at a lower level.
But if you're in the 75% of my audience that doesn't own a home, it's probably because you can't afford one. According to a report by Redfin, only 21% of homes that went on sale in 2022 were considered affordable. That's down from 60% of homes that went on sale in 2021. That means in just 1 year, 2/3 of all affordable housing became too expensive for the average American. The team conducting this survey concluded that housing affordability is at its lowest point in history.
Now, Black Americans find themselves in a position where owning a home is even further out of our dreams than it was for our parents and for their parents, with conditions continuing to worsen. Social engineering has altered us to the point where we are no longer a unified group of people, and we have gave up or lost a lot of skills that we knew as a people.
In a trailblazing interracial community in southern Georgia, the idea for Habitat for Humanity began with a simple vision: a world where everyone has a decent place to call home. Since 1976, that vision has grown into a global movement.
We got a job to do.
That has left us more dependent on the government than ever, that has placed us in a weaker position than we have ever been in history. This is why I am proposing to Black men that it is time that you understand the importance of becoming stockholders and stakeholders in your own community.
You can always tell, can't you? A town with good real estate people is a more substantial community because more people own their own homes. That's right.
Black Man Real Estate Investment Trust. 50 Black men, $500 initial investment, $25,000. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they're giving away, they're doing 5 properties for $25,000. That's a program they have here. They fix up properties at different levels of investment. In addition, $100 per week equals $5,000 in supplies, 10 weeks, 12 hours Saturday, Sunday, 240 labor hours, $12,000 investment per house, averaging expected return 2% ownership after the whole project is complete. All properties complete, $500 in property value. Quarterly dividends required to pay 90% of income to remain tax-free. A required to pay all their dividends, 90% of their dividends out. Step 2, a $100,000 house carry a 30-year mortgage has a value of $300,000. We will employ this method as an equity line of credit to insure our own vehicles, $150 per average full coverage. That equals $7,500 monthly. This will be our additional funding for building our own community, as well as for filling legal requirements under Wisconsin law. However, keeping the revenues within our community and allowing us to benefit. This is becoming stockholders and stakeholders in your community. I'm asking the church, why the church in Milwaukee is not supporting a project such as that. I'm calling the churches out to endorse a member, to sponsor a Black man, to be a part of this type of program, to take domain over your community.
You can always tell, can't you? A town with good real estate people is a more substantial community because more people own their own homes. That's right.